Before the speeches, the elections, and the power of office, many world leaders were ordinary men with lives full of hardship, poverty, and struggle. They came from the lowest rungs of society, some working jobs no one would imagine for future presidents or prime ministers. Yet through resilience, determination, and a relentless drive to change the world, they rose to the very top. Today we look at politicians who started with nothing and climbed all the way to the most powerful positions in history. Abraham Lincoln, born in a one-room log cabin in Kentucky, young Lincoln split rails for fences, worked as a farmhand, and had almost no formal education. Through sheer will, self-study, and persistence, he rose to become the 16th President of the United States and one of history's greatest leaders. Mahatma Gandhi, born in coastal Gujarat, India, Gandhi came from modest beginnings, far from privilege or wealth. He worked as a lawyer and lived frugally before choosing the path of nonviolence and civil disobedience. From humble roots, he became the father of Indian independence and a global symbol of peaceful resistance. Nelson Mandela, growing up in a small South African village, Mandela herded cattle as a boy and lived in conditions far removed from political power. His early struggles and imprisonment for 27 years did not break him. Instead, they transformed him into a leader who ended apartheid and became South Africa's first black president. Lula da Silva, before becoming president of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva was a poor shoeshine boy and metalworker who never even finished formal education. His working-class roots and struggles gave him the voice to represent millions of Brazilians living in poverty. Andrew Johnson, the 17th President of the United States, Johnson was born into poverty in North Carolina, worked as a tailor's apprentice, and had no formal schooling. From stitching clothes to leading a nation, his life was one of the most dramatic rises in American politics. Evo Morales. Growing up in a poor indigenous family in Bolivia, Morales worked as a llama herder and later a coca farmer. His rise from poverty and labor struggles took him to the presidency, where he became Bolivia's first indigenous leader. Konstantin Chernenko. Born to a peasant family in Siberia, he worked on collective farms and had very little education. Against all odds, he rose through the ranks of Soviet politics and briefly led the USSR as General Secretary. Nikita Khrushchev, another Soviet leader who came from nothing, Khrushchev worked as a shepherd and metalworker before slowly climbing into political power. His early life of poverty shaped his populist tone as leader of the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Golda Meir, before she became Israel's first and only female prime minister, Golda Meir was the daughter of poor Jewish immigrants. She worked as a school teacher and had to struggle financially in her early years. Her humble start didn't stop her from becoming one of the most influential leaders of the 20th century. José Mujica, the world's poorest president of Uruguay, Mujica spent his youth as a guerrilla fighter, lived modestly, and even while president donated most of his salary to charity. He was never a man of wealth or privilege, but his humility made him beloved worldwide. Harry S. Truman, the 33rd U.S. president, grew up on a small farm in Missouri, worked in a variety of odd jobs including farm labor, oil drilling, and running a clothing shop before entering politics. His rise from farmhand to leader of the free world remains one of America's most remarkable stories. Angela Merkel. Growing up in East Germany, Merkel's family lived under communist restrictions. She wasn't wealthy or privileged, and she worked quietly as a scientist before turning into one of the most powerful leaders in modern Europe as Germany's chancellor. Benjamin Disraeli, the future British Prime Minister, struggled with debt and financial ruin in his youth. Starting with little money or privilege, he fought through political failures and social prejudice to eventually lead the United Kingdom in the 19th century. Jawaharlal Nehru, though he later gained prominence, Nehru's early years were marked by colonial restrictions and struggles. He worked hard under British rule and led India to independence, transforming from a relatively unknown lawyer into the country's first prime minister. Abdel Nasser, coming from a lower middle-class family in Egypt, Nasser grew up in poverty, worked odd jobs, and struggled before joining the military. His leadership eventually reshaped Egypt and the Middle East. Winston Churchill, born into an aristocratic family but financially unstable, young Churchill struggled academically and faced repeated failures before joining the military. His resilience through personal and political setbacks carried him to become Britain's iconic wartime prime minister. Charles de Gaulle, raised in a modest French family, de Gaulle worked as a career soldier, endured imprisonment during World War I, and suffered repeated failures before rising to lead Free France and later serve as president. Lech Wałęsa, a Polish electrician at the Gdańsk shipyard, Wałęsa came from humble origins but led the Solidarity movement that toppled communism in Poland, eventually becoming president and a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Abdul Kalam, before becoming the president of India, A.P.J. Abdul Kalam sold newspapers as a boy to help his poor family. His brilliance in science and dedication to the country earned him the title of People's President. Barack Obama, raised by a single mother, often living on food stamps and working his way through school, Obama's beginnings were modest. His journey from community organizer to U.S. president became one of the most inspiring stories of modern politics. François Mitterrand, the future French president, came from a working-class family and fought through war, imprisonment, and political rejection before eventually becoming one of France's longest-serving leaders. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first president, grew up in a poor village, walking miles to attend school and working odd jobs before earning education abroad. His leadership brought Ghana independence and made him a Pan-African icon. Dalai Lama, born in a small Tibetan village, he faced political exile and the challenges of leading a nation in diaspora. Through unwavering commitment to peace and compassion, he became a global symbol of nonviolence and spiritual leadership. Eleanor Roosevelt, growing up in a privileged family, she faced personal tragedy and social prejudice. Transforming her life through activism and advocacy, she became a tireless champion for human rights and the most influential First Lady in U.S. history. Martin Luther King Jr. Born into a segregated America, he endured racism, threats, and imprisonment. Through leadership, eloquence, and nonviolent resistance, he became the central figure of the civil rights movement and a global icon for equality. Aung San Suu Kyi, born in Myanmar to a politically active family, she faced long periods of house arrest and political oppression. With steadfast dedication to democracy and human rights, she became a symbol of courage and resilience worldwide. Desmond Tutu, growing up under apartheid in South Africa, he confronted systemic racism and oppression. Through moral courage and faith, he became a Nobel Peace Prize laureate and a leading advocate for justice and reconciliation. Cesar Chavez, born to a poor Mexican-American farm worker family, he faced grueling labor and social inequality. Through organizing and peaceful protest, he co-founded the United Farm Workers and became a hero for labor rights. George Washington Carver, born into slavery, he overcame poverty and racial prejudice through education and curiosity. His scientific genius in agriculture transformed farming in America and inspired generations of scientists. Rosa Parks, growing up in segregated Alabama, she experienced daily racial discrimination. By refusing to give up her bus seat, she ignited the Montgomery bus boycott and became an enduring symbol of civil rights activism. Mother Teresa, born in Macedonia, she faced poverty and immense challenges in her mission to serve the destitute. Through compassion and lifelong dedication, she founded the Missionaries of Charity and became a global humanitarian icon. Susan B. Anthony, born into a modest family, she faced societal prejudice against women and political obstacles. Through relentless advocacy for women's suffrage, she transformed the landscape of American civil rights. Frederick Douglass, born into slavery, he endured brutality and systemic oppression. Escaping to freedom, he became a powerful orator, writer, and abolitionist, inspiring generations to fight for equality. Sojourner Truth, born into slavery in New York, she suffered separation from family and harsh labor. Through speeches and activism, she became a fearless advocate for abolition and women's rights. Malcolm X, growing up in poverty and facing racial violence, he endured crime, imprisonment, and loss. Through self-education and advocacy, he became a compelling voice for Black empowerment and social justice. From Lincoln splitting rails to Obama organizing communities, from shoeshine boys to presidents, from herders to revolutionaries, these stories remind us that leadership is not born out of privilege, but forged in hardship. These men and women rose from poverty and obscurity, proving that true power lies not in where you start, but in how far you're willing to climb. Their journeys from the lowest stages of society to the highest seats of power remain some of the most inspiring political transformations in history.